He brings he brings many years experience and deep insight to this topic. So I'd like you to welcome Steve. If you have questions, pop them into chat and we will have time at the end of the session to deal with them. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Sue. And welcome everyone to our first Connect Inspire share session for the year. I just also want to acknowledge Sue Gallagher as the incoming chair of the PD committee. I'm the outgoing one, or have outgone, is that a word? So Sue, welcome to your first session as chair, which is great. Great to see familiar faces in the gallery. Including some names I recognise from people who answered this questionnaire. So I really, really wanted to say thank you to everybody who is here who actually participated in this questionnaire. This is a direct result as from the information you gave me. Okay, so just my context, just to go a little bit beyond what Sue gave you, is that I'm as interested in the rest of us are in what our one-to-one services look like, because we can get very bound up in our own daily work and what we do, and get very busy, and it's easy to not understand or not be in touch with what is happening with other teams, even in the same city, let alone different states or across the country. So I thought in 2024, I would try to assess what one-to-one advising in the country looks like. And to that end, I did this, conducted this survey with 41 academic language and learning teams from 40 institutions. It's 41 because there was one institution with two separate teams who preferred to answer separately. A couple of teams did not get involved. So of the 43 total teams across the country, we had 41 responses, which I thought was pretty good. If you did attend my talk in Townsville that I gave on this topic, there won't be any chocolate frogs today, sorry. But I still am going to ask you the same questions I asked to that group. I don't need any answers in the chat or anything. Just think of what you think the answer might be. And when you get the answer, compare it to what you were thinking, just as a little interactive exercise. I'm getting some feedback through my headphones, so if we could mute, that would be really good. Thanks. Okay, let's get going. So the first question I asked was, oh no, beg your pardon, just to set some context first. It's individual consultation landscape in Australian all teams. The outcome is for us, or for me, and for a wider group, us to have increased awareness of the national landscape. So it's an information sharing exercise I was hoping for. There is, I guess, the caveat that some of this, at least, the figures I'm going to give you today, some of this will have changed. I acknowledge that. But that, there is still a lot of relevant information we can take from this, which really has resonance for us. It'll be really interesting to see where we go from here. We're seeing some trends at the University of Melbourne already in terms of our one-to-ones, and I'll go on and talk about those as part of what I talk about now. So the first thing was around our team naming and what we call ourselves. Have a think to yourself, what do you think is the most common team name for all teams in Australia? If you want to make note of it in your own head, have a mental note. I did this focusing on two terms, primary focus terms, which was in the as it says, the primary position, the most prominent position. And the key one here was academic, for example, academic skills, academic success. And 9 teams had variation on that, followed by learning at 11. Probably no real surprises here, and followed by student. The secondary focus, the most frequently occurring term in terms of secondary focus was skills, followed by learning and success, followed by those other ones, support services hub. So if you guessed that our most common team name in Australia is academic skills, you guessed correct. Next one was our staff role in terms of naming, classification, and where we're situated, where we're located. And again, have a think about what you think is the most common role title in the country. Again, I looked at primary focus terms and secondary terms, and the key primary focus term was learning. followed by academic. The key secondary term was a mix either of advisor or advisor, and the spelling split came out at advisor over advisor. Not by much, but it clearly did. So the most common role title we have is learning advisor, which kind of makes sense because that's sort of what we're after, is this idea of academic learning. We're advisors, and it's fused with this notion of being academic skills advisors. Our staff classification, we clearly come out as being a professional group, with 78% of us identifying as professional. Interestingly, and I'll provide the link to this at the end, if you look at the larger JALL article I put in and had published earlier in the year, it shows the trend as to what this classification looks like. And this has flipped quite significantly from 59% academic in 2006 to the 14% it is at now. The teams are located centrally for the most part, with 73% of us being located in a central sort of service. Some teams did identify as being central located, but went to pains to sort of stress that the team was library situated, and that sort of seemed to indicate to me their primary identity being that. Sorry, can I just ask again that people mute themselves? I'm getting feedback through my headphones of people whispering stuff. I don't know what that is, but that's what I'm getting. So typically, we're learning advisors with an O, not an E, within an academic skills team of centrally located or managed professional staff. You just muted me, Sue. Okay, staffing makeup. The average ongoing and fixed term staff, that is not including casual staff, the average team size is 7.5, with ongoing 89%, fixed 11%. There's a high nationally without casuals of 23.4 FTE. The national total, pretty reassuringly, is 310 FTE, which feels like a fair bit to me. Including casuals, this pretty much nearly doubles in size to 14.5 average team size, with a high of 36.4 FTE, which is pretty healthy. And again, national total of 416 FTE, which tells us that there are quite a few people employed in this space nationally. So most teams, in fact, 99% of them employ ongoing staff, which is a refreshing statistic. Even if we'd like it to be more people, at least most teams do employ ongoing staff. About half on fixed term staff, and about 1/3 employ some form of casual staff. In terms of student ratios, if you think about what the ratios of a single advisor to a group of students looks like, the advisor to student ratio, pardon me, without casual staff is, as it says here, 1 to 5,408 students. The lowest ratio is 1 to 766, which is pretty good. A high of 19,000, which is a fair stretch. The advisor to student ratio with casual staff drops to 4,432. So what this tells us, I think, is that there is a clear place for casual staff within the AALL landscape, and that they play a pretty significant role. Again, if I use Melbourne University as an example, we bring casual staff in during semester 1 and semester 2, between, say, week 3 or week 4 up to exam week 2. So it's about a 13 or 14 week stretch. And they end up taking about 50% of our one-to-ones. So casual staff seem to, as far as I can see, play a pretty significant role in what we do. So on the one hand, we may lament casualisation, yet on the other hand, we might also say at least there's provision of work for people who are looking for casual work. In terms of the form that one-to-one advising services are offered, online one-to-one appointments, and again, bearing in mind this may have changed at in your context. This is what it was at least a couple of years ago. One-to-one online appointments, usually via Zoom or I guess Teams, are offered by 100% of teams. All teams offer that. In-person appointments are offered by 93% and drop-in service by 27%. There are other services such as writing centres, email feedback, phone appointments, and online chat, although something like online chat and phone appointments are a clear minority provision of service. And you can see some other sort of offerings of information at the bottom there. I won't read everything out. I don't usually like being read to myself, so I'm sure you can read some of this yourself. These slides will be available on the AALL website, and as will the recording be available on the website. So what seems to be the situation here, especially if we look at that top result, is that, again, if I'm thinking of Melbourne University, the place I work, as the example, pre-COVID, this statistic of the offering of how we offered services would have been 99% in person, 1% Zoom, and post-COVID, that is flipped 180 degrees. So we have seen a real post-COVID flip to online. Interestingly, it seems to have stuck around. That said, what we are seeing, at least this year at this institution, and I'd love to know how it looks at other institutions, we are seeing A, an upsurge in requested appointments, and B, a very clear upsurge in in-person appointments. So something that for 3 to 4 years post-COVID wasn't a trend has very suddenly become a trend. And that has been a flip from 2025 to 2026. I could have counted virtually on one hand per semester how many in-person appointments we delivered last year, and we're getting 5 to 6 to 10 appointments through our central inbox every week for in-person appointments. Seems to suggest, and I'll come back to this in the second half of this presentation, it seems to suggest a clear or imply a clear desire of students to work with other people. Next, we looked at total one-to-ones delivered by the team in 2020, delivered by all teams in 2024. 3, interestingly, didn't answer this question. 1 telling me that they were too busy to chase up these kind of stats. So if you're in the room, I've got a bone to pick with you. Anyway, I'm joking, of course. We collectively worked with over 83,000 students nationally. Whatever way you cut that figure, that seems to be a lot of people to me. 83,000 people is robust. Bearing in mind that if I'd gotten figures from all of the teams, I think it would have been close to 90,000 given the average we work with. Speaking of which, the national average of students we work with per institution is there, 2,365. Fairly robust again. A high of 7,940. If you're in the room, that's Monash. I will happily give you a shout out. The ratio of one appointment to students by headcount. So we, on average, work with one appointment per 23 students. A low, and this, if my memory serves me correctly, is Murdoch. So shout out to you if you're in the room, Murdoch. They reach 1.1, as in they do more appointments than they have students. That's the only the only team in the country doing that or achieving that. So that's a pretty good effort. Reach of appointments as a percentage of headcount. So what percentage of headcount of students do we reach? And that figure is 11%. That seems to be around what I would have expected. That 110% is Murdoch again. So I asked about the trend of the last 5 years. What does this look like? I was really interested in this. Does the last 5 years reveal an increase? 56% said yes, it did. 30% said it remained around the same. Only 14% or 5 of the team said their number of one-to-ones had decreased. Again, the question mark is, where does this go? So if your institutions are like what we saw last year, we saw a decrease in 2025. We have seen a clear increase in 2026. What that might be down to, I think, are a few factors. I would like to think that one of them is that students are wanting to work with other people, and maybe maybe, having tried Gen AI as a solution for their academic work, they're thinking it's maybe not giving them everything they want, and they're coming back to work with a student, with an advisor, which would be great if that were the case. Length of one-to-ones. This quite clearly, the biggest result here is 30 minutes. Other places, other teams are offering different lengths of time. Drop-ins tend to be around 10 to 15 minutes, which is fairly normal, 40, 45 minutes, and then you can see the other ones there. This 30-minute length of time is, I mean, there's no, I think, mystery behind this. It seems to be a great length of time to provide enough advice that's robust, and yet not be too long, so that we're spending.
Which would not now see kids. So.
I might ask somebody to mute themselves again. I'm getting some more commentary through the headphones. For me, this is around access and equity, provision, dependency reduction. And we found that when all of our one-to-ones were 1 hour, admittedly that was a long time ago, but they used to all be 1 hour regardless, it often did lead to editing and proofreading versus developmental advising. So the half an hour seems to be a good fit for most teams. You can read at the bottom of the page, there are other time ranges that teams do offer. I asked some more questions around delivery parameters. When are the services offered? All year, mostly, and some teams do restrict to in semester. Most teams have no restrictions in terms of who has access, meaning that any enrolled student can come in to an appointment. Restricted access to some, and only by referral were only a few. Teams often had parameters in terms of service limits, such as no more than 1 appointment per week, or HDR students have longer appointments, or their existence of equity appointments. So maybe students with equity referrals or academic adjustment programs in place. Again, this seems to speak to a very much an important dependency relationship management aspect of one-to-ones, which is clearly, I mean, I know this is not the focus of part 1 of this, it's the focus of part 2, which clearly does separate us from Gen AI offerings, in that we are very active managers of dependency. We're very aware of it. We have a strong understanding of the relational aspects of what we do, and that does come up in the research. Impact of Gen AI on one-to-one service provision. I asked open question about this. The most frequent answer was, we're not sure, we don't know yet. And this still speaks to a space where I think we're evolving. Some talked about studiosity, which was a very mixed, result in terms of success of the studiosity or not. Interestingly, 5 of the responses talked about the positive effect of AI, in that university increased human service alongside with it, and it had no effect, versus 1 that mentioned AI as a threat to the advisor position. I asked about what people felt were the main advantages of the institution offering person-facing one-to-one services. I wonder what you would think the main stated advantage is. What the people who answered this question thought it was that we provide institutional context-specific or contextualized support, which again, no surprise. I mean, I think that's one of the key reasons students want to see us over something like studiosity, because when some teams were using studiosity, they did remark that some of the advice coming back from the advisors through that was that they weren't understanding of the particular local or even Australian context that the students were working in. Tailored to need, advisors understand the students, it's individualized. That sort of does speak to context. So you could almost say that results 1 and 2 were very similar. One thing that I have talked about in the greater article on this research and the other human advising article is this notion. I know Kate Chanek is in the room because I've seen her. One of Kate's big things around the fact that what we do in the one-to-one space very directly informs other academic skills work, thereby creating connectivity with other parts of the university, leading and informing what we do in other areas. There's the effective relational humanist aspect, engaging with a person. So that reflects some of what I was talking about before, that I'm hoping that a reinvigorated interest in working with people is one of the reasons why we're seeing more one-to-ones happening. We're able to make referrals, active referrals within our campuses, which again, Gen AI can't do. And there were other things mentioned, such as safe space and limitations on studiosity, etc. I asked around further comments what managers felt were the disadvantages or challenges of the one-to-one provision of one-to-one services. Not putting aside the fact that a lot of the people who answered this question were in management, I still think it's valid that what they were talking about was a sustainability piece. Even if I think that's a nuanced discussion, I don't think it's a straight up thing of what does a one-to-one itself and of itself cost, and I'll explain more about that later. I'll just leave these up there for 20 seconds, 30 seconds. You can have a look at what they're saying. I didn't attach any percentages with these. This is just what people said. So I just picked out some of the more salient ones I could see. Okay, I asked a counter question to that one, was that in your other further comments, what do you see as the importance of practice, the value of human advising? And this is what a select collection of responses had for us. A range of things there. You take from that what you will, but some of this value of the human provision is going to be echoed in the second half of this presentation, which is now. So the second thing I was really super interested in, having probably like all of us come from a position of not knowing that much about Gen AI a couple of years ago, thinking, well, I think I need to know, and forcing myself to engage with it and become a bit more understanding of it. And that's been a really interesting journey because it's revealed things, I think, about us and about the advising context, which I found really, really interesting. And I'm here to tell you it's not all bad news. It's a lot of it is good news. I'm not speaking to what trends are happening at your institutions or future of services, but I am saying that there is clear value in what we do, and the research tells us there is. So I put the verses in brackets because, I mean, I'm not giving away any great surprises here. I don't think it's a us versus Gen AI context. I think it's an us and Gen AI context, which is where we're headed. So I'm advocating for a hybrid context, and I'll explain that in the next 20 to 25 minutes. So the context for this part of the presentation is individual consultations again about student writing. I hope that we will have a collective increased awareness of where we sit as professionals in this context, viewed through a three-part framework: a personal, pedagogical, institutional framework. A really strong caveat: I'm not anti-Gen AI. I'm a very active user of it. The three pictures you see in front of you are all Gen AI generated in about 23 seconds. So I'm more of a humanist. I like the person and human approach, but I think there is a room for a hybrid nature of what we're doing. There's a broader context that we need to consider when talking about this. It is the fact that there were two, not just one, but two major disruptive agents. Literally a 1 in 100 years advent of a global pandemic. And Gen AI, a major disruptor, probably the biggest disruptor since the advent of the internet itself. And this led to a lot of students increased student support in terms of well-being post-COVID, speaking to a well-being and effective piece that we play in this space. And also within the framework of academic issues regarding Gen AI, that AI concerns reproduction of academic writing sees still, I think, tends to see Gen AI mainly as a threat rather than a potential asset. There is still a lack of consensus on appropriate Gen AI use in higher education and how we approach it. I addressed two key things here. The proposition that Gen AI can perform many of the functions of an academic skills advisor. That's what ASA means in this context, in case you hadn't picked that up yet. And the second proposition that person-facilitated one-to-ones are non-feasible and non-scalable. I think I address both of those in this next 20 minutes. If I don't, please pull me up. I hope I do. So I first considered and researched what the strengths were of Gen AI. I'm not going to spend too long on this, not because I don't believe in them. I do. It's just that I don't know if these bear too much emphasis. But we know it's available. It's easy to use in ways that perhaps sometimes academic skills advisors won't provide repeated help on certain things. It's non-judgmental. There's less power distance. Kim et al. Talk about this idea of it being less embarrassing, showcasing work to a non-active or non-recognitive agent represented by Gen AI. It can be tailored to individual needs, any language, any level, any task type. If you ask it to produce a poem written in Elizabethan English, it will. If you say reform that as a haiku, it will. It seems to be very responsive, at least on a superficial level. In terms of skill development, it facilitates question formation. It facilitates, being able to prompt in clear language, reframe. If I'm being generous, it's in a form of inquiry-based learning. It does, to some degree, ease teacher load, whether we agree with this or not. So in a sense, it can act as a load spreading or decentering agent. Students are clearly open to it. Tech adjacent students are clearly increasingly turning to technology for answers and have, I would propose to you, less or lesser problems than we do. Fewer problems than we do with it. They're quite happy to turn to Gen AI, as the stats there seem to back up. It's transactional. When I say transactional, I mean you ask it something, it gives you back something. And this extra recognitive, I'll keep coming back to this, so it's worth explaining what I mean by this. Extra recognitive feedback is that provided by a source which is not capable of generally being recognized as an agent by other users. So users, Gen AI itself is not a human or an agent recognized as such. So it's providing what we call extra recognitive feedback. And in this case, there's no other recognitive agent required. It's just you and the machine. It can summarize, it can paraphrase, it can clarify terms quickly and easily, and it does this pretty well. So there's things it does well. Then I acknowledge all of those advantages and strengths, and I ask myself, but hang on, what are some of the strengths of a human advisor? And as I kept reading, I kept compiling more and more, and I thought, gee, actually, there's quite a few. So I put together a framework of personal, pedagogical, and institutional factors which place the student with us, the academic skills advisor, at the center of this framework, acting in what we can call a recognitive space, where the recognition or the recognitive element of this is that which is experienced between two human agents capable, in principle at least, of mutual recognition, trust, and understanding. And those words come up quite a bit in this. So considering what the strengths of the human advisor are, we play a very strong, effective role in the use in personal facilitated one-to-ones, where we can talk about or give validation, affirmation, along with providing things like confidence or dealing with anxiety. So there's a positive, I don't want to say negative, but we're addressing sometimes negative issues. But so there's a negative and a positive aspect to this, emotive aspects to study, where we can be helping students clearly who are having issues, but also we're validating students who are doing really well. And we've all worked with that type of student who comes in, they're showing us something, they're a bit nervous, and you're like, this is actually really good. I really like how you're doing this. And their face lights up. You can see it. And I know I can see Tao back nodding because I'm citing his research here. So we're quite instrumental in this space. Thanks, Tao. It's good research. So in this context, we effectively notice, and by that, I'm a strong educationalist, and for me, notice is not just its everyday meaning of casually glancing at something. It's really taking a look and seeing something for what it is. So we are able to effectively notice in this space because there's a mutual recognition of agency and vulnerability that we can only have and only possess as another human, right? So it's an existential question that this is something Gen AI simply can't provide. It's not sentient. It never will be sentient. It doesn't recognize or care for the user. So when it says things like, that's great, well done, or I'm sorry to hear you're stressed, if you've prompted in, I'm feeling stressed about my study, or I'd love your feedback on this. It says, good, I'm glad. It's not glad. It doesn't care. It's not worried about the user. It has none of those feelings. It has no more emotive understanding than Microsoft Word does for an essay written on it. That's not to say it's not good at what it does. It is good at what it does, but recognizing users' affective and recognitive emotions is not one of the things it can do. So this idea of connection, identity recognition, referral onto other services, prioritization of role, we're able to say that doesn't seem to be a problem in our heads. This is the problem, and shifting it. Understanding of the context and the range of what students are presenting as with needs beyond transactional is a real separator. Coming back to this one I talked about before, dependency management. So we are able to foster a sense of student agency, efficacy, confidence, self-regulation, and we are actually genuinely going for independence. I'm sure you've all used the expression in your own sites, which says something like, in an ideal world, we want them to come back, come and see us and then not come back because they've got from us what they want to get. So this notion of independence, again, is a absolute direct opposition to what Gen AI seeks to do. It wants the students to come back. It's engineered to provide smooth flow, human-like experience where the user can return repeatedly. So in some ways, Gen AI is engineered for dependency, indirect recognition of what we seem to do, with no recognition of problematic consultation. So for example, if a student logs on to ChatGPT for the third time at 3 a.m. crying, it has no understanding or recognition of this. So this is exacerbated in a study by Zhou and Zhang, found that a perception of humanity, or this anthropomorphism at the other end of the platform, this idea of interactivity, possible intelligence, personalization of its phrasing, has an effect on emotional factors, which include how well the experience flows and their attachment to it. And they found that these things lead to user addiction. And this idea that you're working with a human, even though subliminally you may know you're not, can lead to attachment and trust, which is another way of saying dependency. We bring a sense of self to the role, a present self, an experiential person with a sense of a past, present, and a future in which we can rationalize, explain, reflect, recast, reconsider our advice, see that it's not landing, try it in some other way. So we sort of have an extra contextual element or context to this, where we can situate knowledge and navigate a wider context beyond writing. And that's illustrated in the graded journal article I wrote by an example I gave in the article of a student who came and saw me with a very highly problematic paper in which she was talking about post-Hurricane Katrina politics in reference to African Americans in Florida being slaves, and talking about them clearly within the context as if it was, I'm talking pre-Civil War slavery terms. And I had to really sensitively recast the conversation with the student that sought to reposition this because, again, I had an extra contextual understanding of what was supposed to be happening and was able to guide the student through it. And she was due to submit that paper in a couple of hours, and we had to sort of then work upon the idea of how might you get an extension on this, none of which Gen AI can provide in that terms of the extra contextual advising context. One-to-one dialogic exchange is a valuable mental exercise. So what we're seeking to do here is to have students resolve what can be called cognitive disfluency, which is particularly valuable for things like essays, which are ill-defined problems, okay? What Risco and Gilbert talked about in this paper that's now 10 years old, but still very relevant, is this idea of cognitive offloading. Now, they didn't put any positive or negative value on that because we now talk about things like detrimental cognitive offloading versus beneficial cognitive offloading. But a few papers talk about this idea of cognitive offloading in its detrimental sense, that it can bypass learning. That if students are using Gen AI in ways in which circumvent or take the place of, in fact, bypass their learning, it can result in what Fan et al. Called metacognitive laziness. There's a great article just released this year by two academics, Lodge and Lobel, and they reframed cognitive disfluency, which is a constructivist view of what it's called. They called it desirable difficulty, which I really love. That's a brilliant expression, that students need to engage in positive, hard work in order to get better, understand the domain they're working in, and understand the critical analytical skills they need to have. And what they talk about is this interesting thing of a performance paradox, where students that tend to learn or outsource their learning in ways we don't recommend, which we're calling detrimental cognitive offloading, face this thing called a performance paradox, where they become dependent, overuse it, and while there is some short-term gain in terms of task completion, there is a long-term development harm that a number of research papers have found, further leading to an illusion of competence. So this idea of fluency of response, it being able to put together a response very quickly, which the student can subsequently hand in, students in a sort of a Dunning-Kruger effect are starting to think they're better than they are, which is interesting. That paper reference is down there if you're interested in following that up. I highly recommend that as a very, very illustrative read. There is a normalization of person-to-person help seeking by students coming to see us. There's a subtle Gen AI reinforcement that help seeking is best done behind closed doors where no one can see it. We provide an authentic person-to-person contact in an increasingly tech-dominated world, and the idea that human contact reinforces the message that other people's voices do matter. In terms of pedagogical reasons, education essentially is still a socially mediated activity. And a one-to-one provides that with a dialogic other, in where knowledge is co-constructed, individuals can make interpretations founded within a dialogue with each other. The important thing here is that there's a corollary recognitive obligation or a real dialogic understanding that there's another person in the room. So the one-to-one reflects a broader dialogic nature of the demands of university. So what that's basically saying in a long-winded way, we're giving them a nice little leg up in terms of how they're supposed to dialogically behave in broader contexts. Some feedback does need to be mediated. One of the other findings from Lodge and Lobel was that undirected use tended towards the detrimental offloading we are not looking for. And so the mutual recognivity of the dialogic space, of the transactional space, does help this, because as Carlos, and if you've probably heard of Carlos and Bode, they're very big in the feedback space. Trust in other, the trust in the other agent to provide this feedback is a big factor in the prompt to action piece. So that if the student can trust the person giving the advice to them, they're more likely to act on it. And people like us can say, hey, what are you going to do after this appointment? How are you going to act on this? What happens next? None of which the Gen AI obviously can do. There's a washback effect of engaging with a person in spoken to person dialogue. Writing does not take place as an independent act, and this is often what's forgotten. It takes place regarding or in relation to other academic contexts, such as classrooms or presentations or study group discussions or emails to a lecturer. So the writing itself takes place in context or relation to other academic acts. And one-to-ones seek to engage students in this type of resolution of cognitive disfluency, or what we call desirable difficulty before. Again, Gen AI seeks to mitigate that. It seeks to do the opposite. It seeks to resolve those issues for them, which is something we don't want to do, and we talk about not wanting to do that. There's also an idea or a context to one-to-ones just beyond responding to prompts, which is what Gen AI does. We proactively triage, we diagnose, we scaffold awareness of things that they might not be aware of. So this can become particularly problematic if a user of Gen AI does not have the level of criticality or intellectual awareness they need to engage with that at the level they need to. They can be prompting it with completely the wrong thing and getting the wrong things out of it. So ironically, students' best place in terms of language and academic skills to most leverage Gen AI actually may be better off working in a challenging dialogue with us than they would with a Gen AI. We engage students in critical discussions. So where we talk about critical interrogation of ideas, and students need to have this critical interrogation skill and domain knowledge in order to be able to critically interrogate Gen AI outputs. As I said before, I won't go on about this again. It has no concern for the truth. It has more concern, quotation marks, for user flow experience. Interestingly, most employees see this critical thinking as a critical skill. So that DEC report's a really good read because it says, yes, we want students who can use and be aware of Gen AI, but you need to be people as well. People with people skills is still what we're looking for. So we provide these critical dialogic opportunities which facilitate, again, develop engagement with deep learning. Another interesting thing found in the Lodge and Lobel report was that there seems to be emerging an equity gap, otherwise known as the Matthew effect, which is interesting. That students who use Gen AI tend to be novice users, students who haven't developed their skills yet. Those students who tend to offload or outsource are those who tend not to have the critical reasoning resources required to critically interrogate outputs, which is what we are saying needs to happen. So the ones that tend to use it in ways we don't recommend are the ones who can least afford to, leading to a wider of the gap. Finally, we're on to the institutional positives of the human advisor. We have a positive role in academic ethics. I think that's pretty clear. We have no vested interest in leading students down any sort of pathway that sees them having academic questions about what they're doing. When I cycle back to this, I call it the Chinokian effect in respect to Kate Channock, talking about the flow-on effect of one-to-ones. So this idea that one-to-ones inform other all work, which tells us, if we accept the fact that one-to-ones inform how we do workshops, how we talk to academics about what might be problematic or working in their subjects, how we put resources together, all of that work is directly informed by what we get out of our conversations with students in the one-to-one basis. For that reason, I think there's absolutely a referred scalability question here, that the cost is absolutely justified by the fact that it informs everything we do. They can't be seen just in isolation. Interestingly, the individual nature of Gen AI, you do it in your own bedroom, it's not, or your own study room, it's not supposed to be done as a group thing. There's no references, there's no flow on. There's less scalability to that than there is to what we do, which is something which sort of was a bit of a light bulb moment for me when I discovered or thought about that. We have a deep knowledge of our contexts, we have insider knowledge, all those things. Quite frankly, offering of human advising speaks to its value. It should be a cost that institutions bear. It shouldn't just be an economic rationalized neoliberal thing. Don't want to be too political about it, but if we can see the value beyond the immediate isolated one-to-one into what else we do, we can see that. So to conclude, what do we know? Gen AI has absolute strengths and advantages to offer, but so do we. So I propose, it's just not an earth-shaking proposal, it's just to say that we can exist in a hybrid construct, as outlined by Zhang et al., where AI can be a first responder of extra cognitive type of feedback. If you remember, that's the non-agent feedback that can deal with extraneous load, things like check my grammar, check my spelling, confirm this word, give me some question forms for my next exam, before going into a recognitive intrinsic load reduction context with a human advisor, leading to independence and self-regulation. So where are we at? We need to accept it's here to stay. Let's understand it. It has its strengths, but so do we. My takeaways, at least, is that all of us deliver, all teams at the moment delivering one-to-ones. We deliver a lot of service, and casual staff clearly help in that. One-to-ones clearly have value, but there are challenges, one of which is economic and always will be. One-to-ones, however, do have a referred scalability. We're still yet to see the full impacts of Gen AI. I suspect there might be a slight pushback against it back towards people. Interestingly, 3.5, nearly almost 4 years post Gen AI writing and the death of the essay, writing is still very much here, at least it is in my institution. I'm tipping it is in yours. So human advisors matter, people matter, we matter, teachers matter. The Corbyn article is fantastic on this about why people matter. So I would like to propose that we need to keep evidencing the value of one-to-one services. That's if we value it ourselves. Here's a link to the 2 articles that I've been referencing. They're the ones I wrote for the journal, and an extended bibliography, which I did use for both of my papers, with the green highly recommended ones. I'm a bit out of breath. I think I'll stop talking now and throw the room open to you, Sue.
Well, not to me. I want to thank you, Steve. That was really tough, like having to condense 2 presentations down to 1. That you did a good job. Thank you so much. There's been quite a lot of discussion going on in the chat. Not a lot of questions. Does anyone have a specific question they would like to ask? Would you like to unmute yourself and ask? Stacey has her hand up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi everyone.
Stacey?
Hi everyone. I'm Stacey from QUT. I posted it in the chat as well. After one-to-one appointments, we write journal notes with the interaction, and a lot of staff, we've been wondering about the ethical and appropriate use of the AI notes for online appointments, that we just copy those and edit them down for our journal notes, whether we have to tell students we're doing that. So I'm curious what other people are doing in that space. So it's using the AI to create your journal notes from one-to-one appointments.
Anyone?
I can answer for our place. Is that we don't use AI for that reason. We just type straight into our database. So I'm probably not best qualified to answer that part.
Anybody else?
Yeah, hi. My name's Byron. I'm from CQ University. I'm at Central Queensland University on Melbourne campus. We have a high number of equity students, and I also spent a fair bit of time in Japan. Steve, I was there for 10 years. My main background is second language teaching. And one of the things I learned early on in that is the concept around affective factors in student learning. So if anyone who's taught in Japan, I'm sure there'll be others in the group today, knows how hard it can be to get some Japanese students to actually speak. The question really is, do you see a connection between that concept and the reduction of learner anxiety for this type of students that we deal with one-to-one? Personally, I do, but also it helps overcome that imposter syndrome that I think some students who are very nervous, first in family, rural, remote, Indigenous backgrounds, all the usual equity type groups. Yeah, so just like your ideas, feedback on how important that is as a human advisor, and the fact that AI is never going to be able to replicate that effectively.
Oh, I couldn't back up what you said anymore. I mean, I really do hope that came out in what I talked about, and I chose the effective factor as the first point deliberately because I think of how important that is. I also empathize, if that's the right word, the work in Japan. I worked there for 6 years, and it is sometimes hard to draw water from those stones. But for me, and I've been involved in training recently of 3 new casual staff we've brought on. And one of the things that keeps coming up is this engendering of the positive, safe space for students. It's okay to come and see us. That's not a silly question. You're not unique in facing these type of problems if they're coming for a problem-based consultation. But to really normalize help seeking and to normalize this notion that we can help them, and the seeking of that help is 100% okay. But also on top of that, it's not just a sort of a session just for validation and making them feel good. It's a session whereby they can leave it after half an hour or 1 hour thinking, I know there's things I can do about the things I've asked about. I've got answers to my questions. I've got them from a person. It was a validating, positive experience in which I learned something. So those to me are always things I want to talk about. That's why I try, after 16 years of doing this, it's still front of mind. Give the first few minutes of the consultation to the student. How can I help you? How are you feeling? Is everything okay? And that effective piece, I think, is really big, huge.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, good question.
Questions? I have one question I'd like to mention, Steve. You said earlier in your presentation that the University of Melbourne has seen a sudden surge in one-to-one appointments. Did I understand that correctly?
A sudden surge in requests for in-person appointments.
In-person
Yeah.
appointments. I'm just wondering if that's common across the sector or whether that's a capital city group of 8 type of thing at a university where a lot of the students are actually on campus. I can't see that happening at my current university, for example, because we're a regional university where a very large number of our students are external and are not available to come to campus during working hours anyway. So I'm curious if this is something peculiar or not peculiar, specific to University of Melbourne or more widely across the sector. What do other people think?
Feel free to unmute yourself if you
Yeah.
Steve, just regarding those the shift towards in-person consults, do you get a sense of whether that's students who are needing support because their preparation's not quite optimal where it needs to be, or is it students aspiring to do better who are kind of trying to fill some of those gaps, find or develop their strategies to improve them and improve their results?
I think both, but a third thing is in person over Zoom, and still I've got to say 96 to 97% of our appointments are through Zoom, and they're highly evaluated, they run really well and they're well regarded, is that students to say in their request notes, because they have to request in person through our central inbox, is something like, I just prefer working with a person, in person. I'm just more comfortable doing that. So I don't know if it's an issue of not being as prepared as they could be. It seems to be, to me, without having this is anecdotal evidence, is that seems to be the answer.
Right. The other factor might be mature students or that sort of thing, because I've noticed talking to them that they are much more likely to want to talk to someone than to do something online even.
Yeah, it's also tied to confidence, I think. They feel
Yep.
like they would just rather be next to a person or facing a person. Yeah, so that seems to be it. And we do have a few mature, you're right. We do have a few mature age requesting that. And that might be just a sort of a tech thing. I'm just more comfortable talking to someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
We are just about out of time. So I would once again like to thank Steve for his presentation. I guess if you've got a desperate question to ask, we could hang around a little
I'm
longer,
happy to
but
hang around a
people
bit
may
longer, yeah.
need to leave. I just want to point out that our next session will be in June. And this session will be delivered by Raquel Salmason and Debbie Howarth, and it's going to have a focus on numeracy. The title is Embedding Numeracy in University Curricula Using the Academic Numeracies Framework, and it's another encore presentation from the conference, another popular conference presentation. But once again, thank you so much, Steve. And we'll
Thank you.
hang around here if anyone wants to chat more. Or I'll
Sure.
hang around here if you want to chat more. I can't speak for you, Steve.
No, I can. Thanks for coming,
Good.
everybody. Really
All
appreciate
right. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.